So, hello and welcome to our fourth episode of In-House Matters by Lorcadia, a series of short, sharp conversations with legal leaders who are driving change and improving how teams work. I'm Sasha Kirk, co-founder and chief marketing officer at Lorcadia, and thank you for joining us. Before we dive in, a quick note, this session is being recorded and we'll share a copy afterwards. Feel free to drop questions in the Q&A box as we go, and we'll have time at the end to cover those off. Today, we're talking about legal operations and more specifically, how to turn intentions into real measurable impact. I'm joined today by Lindy Muto, Legal Operations Manager at ASIC, and someone who I've known for a number of years in the industry. Lindy is a former General Counsel with 20 years of commercial and corporate legal experience in various sectors across Australia, United Kingdom, United Arab Emirates, and Asia. Over the past 10 years, Lindy has focused on legal operations, working across corporate and government in-house environments, and also working within private practice. Lindy is passionate about mapping and improving processes, developing strategy, and building foundations that make legal operations transformation achievable. Her focus is on delivering clarity, structure, and results. Lindy, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Sasha. Thanks so much for having me.
So we're going to dive in, and I've got a couple of themes that I'm wanting to cover off while we're talking. But the first question to get us started is, how do you go about identifying the right starting points when it comes to legal operations improvements?
So every team starting point is going to be different depending on the maturity of their team and where they are in their legal ops journey. But generally, I always tell people to start by understanding what the current pain points, problems, and inefficiencies are within their teams. This will help them determine their current state of operation. The most vital step is to start interviewing your key stakeholders. This will vary from team to team, but I have interviewed everyone in a firm, up to 80 people, from a receptionist to a managing partner, to just a group of 20 to 30 people who represent not only the legal team, but the business unit within the organisation. You need to really understand what makes the team tick, and interviewing them reveals a lot of information. And you always need to make sure it's a real natural type of chat, so people will reveal what all of their pain points are. It's also really important to look at existing data that you've got within the team, because that data will help you identify additional bottlenecks, whether that be from billing to contract lifecycle management to external legal spend. By doing this, you can actually understand what the problem is and then align it to the corporate strategy. It helps me map out the legal problems to that overall strategy and how it's going to create an impact and have a lot of visibility. So that alignment is going to give you a greater return, not just for value for the legal team, but for the whole organisation. And then finally, I then gather all that up. It's a long answer, but it's quite involved. But you gather all that information up and determine what your quick wins are going to be and what's going to be foundational for you to achieve your much longer term projects, and then demonstrate this in a 12 to 24 month roadmap to ensure that you're going to get buy-in and make sure you're bringing everyone on the journey to understand the vision and the direction and the reason for why you're doing what you're doing.
And you've talked about that legal ops roadmap. I'm curious about, what does that really look like in practice?
So it's a high-level plan that identifies all of your initiatives, your quick wins, your major projects, and what's the timeline to achieve each one of those. It's a great way of visualizing the plan, like using things like Gantt charts. But what sits behind that roadmap is that very detailed project plan to ensure that you can actually execute and implement each of those initiatives, quick wins, and major projects. I think it's important to note that the roadmap, although it's this high-level plan, it is not a set and forget document. It is a live document that you constantly need to change based on the priorities and the changes within your team and your organisation or law firm. It's a plan that's going to help you in legal operations to stay focused, stay aligned with the business, and be accountable for what you're actually trying to achieve. And that's really important because otherwise, sometimes in legal operations, you can be pulled from pillar to post because so many people have different ideas, and you need to be really purposeful and make sure that you're there fixing the little issues that are actually going to have an impact on the bigger picture.
That really resonates with me. And some of those things will be little, perhaps to the outside world, but actually can have quite a big impact. You've talked a little bit about stakeholders and people having different ideas or different things that they're wanting to achieve. And it brings me on to my next question. How do you decide what to prioritize?
So prioritization is very difficult at times because of the continuing changing landscape within your organization and what's considered at the one point in time, what is important. So I think what you need to really focus on is always align your projects with the overall corporate strategy. What initiative or project is actually going to make an impact? You're going to see a change, what's going to move the dial, what's going to show improvement. You need to prioritize some quick wins to build that momentum and that credibility and buy-in. But those quick wins should be there to actually help you build onto those larger projects. And I think it's also important with prioritization to understand what your dependencies are to achieve your goals. For example, you can't launch into a major project if you haven't done the work that needs to fit behind it. An example of that is one of my initiatives is dashboard reporting. But if I don't have the data or the clean data that sits behind it, then I won't be able to achieve that goal. I have to prioritize the little things before I can actually achieve the bigger goal.
I think that kind of goes to some of the things that we were talking about even before we jumped on the webinar. For some legal teams, they're really wanting to get their arms around and manage their spend, for example, but they haven't yet got a panel of law firms
Yes.
bedded down. We've talked about those long-term goals and having those mapped out on the roadmap. And then we've also talked about the importance of having those sort of early wins. How do you balance between the two?
That's a really great question. I think you need to understand how that small early win is going to contribute to the bigger picture. So just going back to that example I gave before about the dashboard reporting, I need to build this dashboard reporting, but in order to have that reporting, we need to be data rich. I transitioned my current team from using Excel spreadsheets, which were very manual entries, into an automated pre-populated SharePoint list, which then flows through to the high-level Power BI dashboard. And so this actually has achieved the ultimate goal of uplifting our reporting capability, which is the big picture. But the small win was basically creating a SharePoint list, which is something so small, so minor, but this changed the way of working within our team. It changed the way we collected data, and it didn't actually add any additional time to the lawyer's day. It actually improved their day. So that little small change has made a major impact. So it's really important to make sure that whatever that smaller change is, it has a connection through to the bigger picture.
I think that's a really great example. And I think it's also recognizing that there's some things that legal operations in that role can really take on, things that you're really skilled at, that you can excel at, that they're probably getting quite stressed about. So having you there to be able to take that weight off them would then open up and give them extra time and capacity and also that less stress. So your colleagues within the in-house legal team and them wanting to get more confident with the changes that you're making. What other approaches have you used for building that confidence and maintaining that momentum?
You've probably heard this 1,000 times, but you really need to take the people on the journey. You need to show them that the change is actually not scary. It's not a burden to their day-to-day lives. Rather, we're there to solve one of their frustrations and their pain points, and then demonstrate to them how, by you solving it, what it's actually doing to their day-to-day life. And an example of that is when I was working with a client who had a very complicated process to sign documentation. We mapped out what the current process was and then mapped out the future state. And that was about integrating the new e-signing tool into their document management system, where we actually eliminated the time spent uploading and downloading documents, reducing that email correspondence regarding whether or not a document was executed, tracking where that document was in the signing process. And we created a whole filing system from the creation of getting the document signed to when it came back into the system and filed into the right folder. When this process was implemented, the team saw so much value and benefit, especially like for the more junior lawyers and the EAs, because it freed up so much of their time, it improved their interaction with clients. And as soon as they saw something so simple added so much value to their life, all they wanted is more. And this actually created so much momentum for all other projects. So it was really important for me to pick a project that wasn't so overly burdensome, but I knew was going to have a big impact, which then created that momentum.
And that's going to give your colleagues a lot of confidence with other initiatives that you're then taking forward. Some of the criticism, which is probably warranted when it comes to lawyers and people working within the legal teams, that they can be resistant to change. And the stakeholders within the business and the senior executives, they can also have a big role in the success of your initiatives. You've talked about taking them on that journey. What sort of strategies can help gain that buy-in from senior leadership in the wider business?
So you're taking them on that journey, and they might be a resistor. I think it's important to understand that no matter what, not everybody's going to come on this journey. You have to recognize that there's a resistor. But you need to show them what that journey is all about. You need to show them from the beginning to the end. You need to show them the benefits to them, to their team, and to the wider business. I found some strategies that I've used with some senior leaders is mapping their personas and understanding where they're coming from. And maybe it's the way that they learn is different. Once I've been able to identify the way they learn, I might spend one-on-one time with them to show them what benefit they will get from these changes. I might do group sessions because that's the way they prefer to ingest information. But it's super important that everyone comes along on this journey. They see the benefit to them, but we also need to encourage the senior leaders to lead by example. So by actually showing what they're doing, not just talking the talk, they actually need to show their teams. And that has a real impact on the rest of the organization. So if you've got like a managing partner implementing these changes, then it'll have a flow-on effect to the rest of the team. I've seen lots of different situations in my life as a consultant, and I had one example where I had the managing partner would do amazing communications out to his team and really encourage his team to take on board these new ways of working, but he didn't take those on. And as soon as he didn't take those on, then everyone else would say, if he doesn't do it, I won't do it. And then that's going to have that negative impact. So it's so important to recalibrate and talk to that particular person to ensure that we're not actually going to achieve what we want if you're not doing it. So those strategies of spending that one-on-one time with them, showing them the ultimate benefit to themselves, their team, and the wider business has always been a little bit of a recipe for success for myself.
And I really like what you've described there of having tailored strategies for different people. And some of those you can group together, as you say, different personas, but then actually following that through. And if there is someone who is being quite openly resistant and vocal about it, sitting down with them one-on-one and working through it with them is probably going to get you a better outcome instead of just treating them the same as you would others, because maybe they just need a bit of extra time and you can spend that with them one-on-one. It's also acknowledging that some of the things that you're talking about, Lindy, is taking some psychological approaches as well and understanding the psychology of how people learn and how people adopt it and take change forward, because it's different, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point about the psychology. I think it's super important to understand the psychology of lawyers. I can say we because I'm one of them. We think differently, we've operated differently. It's ingrained into us from the day we go to law school. And I might be a little bit controversial, but I think it's so important to have either some legal background or have worked with lawyers in order to get this buy-in, because when you're trying to seek buy-in from senior leaders, you want to be able to relate to them. And, it's easy to relate to them when you can say, I've been in your position before, or understand how the practice of law operates. So that's also a little bit of a secret recipe that I use quite often, because they can really connect to me and relate on all different types of levels and see that what I'm trying to do is actually going to be benefiting them.
I'm interested in understanding if you are working as a legal operations professional and you haven't previously worked as a lawyer, what tips would you suggest for them?
I really think they need to understand the landscape of law firms. They need to understand how the lawyers operate. And I think they need to spend time with the lawyers and the different practice areas within the law firm or the in-house team to fully embrace the way that they actually work and what their pain points are. And you need to relate to them. So, you may not have worked in a law firm before, but be guided by someone like myself who's more in a senior position, who will help you navigate some of those conversations, because it's really important. Like, I've had IT people that have come in, and IT and lawyers, sometimes there's a communication barrier there, and they need someone who's able to translate that language between the IT language and the legal language. And nothing is going to beat experience on the ground. And I think that's really important. Although I say it's important to have the legal kind of background understanding, but you need to understand what other industries are doing and leverage from what they are doing and implement it into your day-to-day work. So someone who has completely different experience in another field will be great in this area, but they do need to learn and understand how lawyers operate.
Yeah, I completely agree. Now, I'm just going to take us on a little bit of a side journey because we've
Yeah.
got a really great question that's come through from
Okay.
the audience. It's a really great question. I think it can take us into lots of different areas. So let's unpack that.
Mhm.
How would you approach a project where an in-house legal team has no current documented legal operations, processes, or procedures, and is resistant to implementing documented processes or procedures?
You need to show the value. So pick a process that it's not a difficult process. Pick something that's going to have a real impact, and then map out that process. Use a tool like Visio if you've got access to it, or just map it out in Word, but do a step-by-step guide and show what they're currently doing. And this requires a lot of time and effort, where you sit with the person who is actually doing the activity. And when you sit with them and you get them to spell out exactly what they're doing, it is so glaringly obvious of how many steps they're undertaking that they actually don't need to undertake, and how many different systems they're accessing, or how inefficient they are from a time perspective. So I think it's really important to visualize that. So they might not want to map out their processes, but if you pick something that's small and easy and then map that out and then show them what it looks like, I think that the penny starts to drop and they realize, okay, we need to make some change here. And that's when then you would step in and then try and map out what the new process would be, whether that be eliminating a step, whether that to be introducing some basic automation that's available within your own Microsoft suite, whether that be potentially introducing a new system. It can be lots of things, but the visualization of a process is really important.
And I like how then instead of trying to process everything all at once, actually just let's focus on something small and achievable.
Yes.
And then what would you suggest? Then you just keep going.
Pick one that's going to make an impact, something small, map that out, show them that where the inefficiencies actually are, talk about why are you doing this particular step, they might say to you because there's no other way of doing it based on your experience or talking to other team members or other business units. There may be other ways of doing it. Someone in procurement might be doing something else that you can leverage. And so then you can start to show them how you can eliminate something that they were doing, which is wasting time, or a better way of working. But the visualization of a process is very important because then people can see what's happening. If you don't visualize it for them, they'll just say, oh, this is easy. I keep doing this and I just have to click that button and then I'll move on to this. And it's automated in their mind, but they don't realize they're doing way too many steps.
Drawing on your experience with your legal operations projects, what are the common challenges that you've seen that cause momentum to stall?
It's always bureaucracy. Getting the approvals. Do you have budget? Do people actually understand what you're trying to achieve? Have you actually achieved buy-in? Have you engaged with your stakeholders correctly? You constantly have to be a salesperson. You need to be selling what it is that you're doing. You need to demonstrate how it's going to improve their day-to-day work. You're going to have to show how by spending X amount is going to give you a return on investment. So, yeah, I think that the bureaucracy of getting something done is always a challenge. Be that salesperson and you will kick a lot of goals and win a lot.
I think it sounds like there's opportunity for you to anticipate what those objections might be. So perhaps through the process, you can start to think about how am I going to sell this internally?
Mhm. And the way that I always sell things internally is how's this aligned with the corporate strategy? And if you are aligning with the corporate strategy, if you're going to ultimately allow the organization to achieve what it is that they want to achieve by you doing something, then the buy-in is a lot easier.
Absolutely. Now, the final question, Lindy, is really drawing on your exceptional experience within the industry. What are the biggest challenges that you've faced in your career?
My biggest challenge has actually been the move from being a lawyer to a legal operations professional. It was a very bumpy ride. As a lawyer, it was a very stable career, and I worked and lived all over the world, and progression was quite easy and identifiable because I was a revenue earner. Then I became a cost centre and I returned to Australia, and the market wasn't as mature as it is in other markets. So, what I've learned when looking for legal operations roles, especially here in Australia, is to make sure that when you're talking to the organisation or the firm, is to make sure that legal operation is actually within their long-term vision and direction. It's not just the shiny new thing that they want to be part of and they just want to give it a go. You want to make sure that the organisation has had a really considered approach. Legal operations is being built as part of their strategy, and the organisation has a mindset of improvement and efficiency for a long-term gain, not just one-off projects, and really keep selling legal operations as being that chief operating officer for legal teams.
Yeah, absolutely spot on. And I love how you've described that as that chief operating officer for the in-house legal team or the private practice firm, because I think that's
Yes.
absolutely critical. So that brings us to
Yeah.
the end of this episode of In-House Matters by Lorcadia. Lindy, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your legal operations experience. And thank you to everyone who's joined us today. We'll share the recording and some key takeaways shortly. And if you'd like to continue the conversation or learn more about Lorcadia, please reach out to me on LinkedIn or explore more at lorcadia.com. And stay tuned for the next episode of In-House Matters by Lorcadia, where I'll speak with Angela Grant and talking about how to attract and retain in-house lawyers, a topic that is close to many general counsel's heart, I'm sure. So thank you very much, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.